looking, throwing in the end zone.
Montana, touchdown, John Taylor.
Young to the air, Young to Jerry Rice, touchdown San Francisco.
Young stumbles on the way back and fires up the middle. Pass is caught by Owens.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 49ers Plus podcast. I'm your host, Al Moriello, and this is your source for the most objective 49ers discussion and analysis, plus timely and entertaining sports and pop culture topics. And today, we're going to look back at the 49ers' convincing 42-19 victory over the Eagles with some Pro Football Focus ratings, snap counts of note, why some 49er players wore black going into that game, what the defensive game plan going in from defensive coordinator Steve Wilks, Brock Purdy's stats through a full 17 games now, roster signings and releasing players Niners may be interested in, injuries, Pro Bowl leaders, playoff clinching scenarios, and previewing the rematch against Seattle in Santa Clara this time on Sunday. In the plus section, we're going to be talking the New York Jets, and the Zach Wilson drama continues, how Disney has lost more than $1.3 billion at movie theaters this year, and we'll conclude by making Week 14 NFL picks. But like always, it starts with the Niners, so let's get right into it.
Let's talk Niners!
So let's start off with some Pro Football Focus ratings. Top 5 highest rated on offense and defense. On offense, Deebo Samuel, 86.1. Christian McCaffrey, 85.6. Purdy, 80.9. Running back Eli Mitchell, 77.5 on 5 snaps. And wide receiver Brandon Ayuk, 76.5. On defense, Fred Warner led the way, 90.2. Nick Bosa, 85.6. Dre Greenlaw, who played for a little over a half, 78.8. Javon Hargrave, 74.6. And backup D tackle Kalia Davis, 71.3 on 19 snaps. So the stars showed out, right? On offense, Deebo, 3 touchdowns. McCaffrey, Purdy throwing 4. Mitchell playing 5 snaps and getting sore, and he's questionable. He has a sore knee, questionable for this week against Seattle. And Ayuk obviously kicked off the scoring in the first quarter. And then on defense, it was the stars again. It was Warner, it was Bosa, Greenlaw before suplexing Devontae Smith and putting a finger in the fat face of Dom, Javon Hargrave. And it was nice to see Kalia Davis get some runs, second round player who did not play most of last year rehabbing from an ACL injury, but it was nice to see he got about 19 snaps and was rated highly. Snap counts of note on offense, 59 total snaps. The running back breakdown, McCaffrey played 52, Mitchell 5, Jordan Mason 3. And at tight end, Kittle played 55 snaps, Werner 12, Dwelly 1, and the one snap that he played injured his ankle. He might be a short-term IR candidate, but got hurt on that sole snap. On defense, 72 snaps. The DNs, Bosa played 52, Chase Young 36, Cleveland Ferrell 30, and Randy Gregory 26. So big games obviously means that your best players need to play a lot, and that's like the Niners' MO, whether it's a big game or not. McCaffrey playing all but 7 snaps, Mitchell playing 5, Kittle playing all but 4. The other 2 tight ends combined for 13 snaps. Good to see, though, at least the defense getting some rest. Bosa played 52 of 72 snaps, getting rest because the game got out of hand in the third and fourth quarter. Young 36, Ferrell 30, and Gregory 26. Nice defensive end rotation, but the Niners, again, offensively leaning heavily on their stars. I didn't give the snap counts for Ayuk or Deebo. They was obviously up there. They were in the mid to low 50s. So obviously the stars played. They played a lot until it got out of hand, and especially defensively, they were able to get some rest to many of their starters. One thing that came up in an article I was reading today, and it was actually an interview that Trent Williams gave to, I don't know if it was Rich Eisen, or it might have been Rich Eisen, but I very well could be wrong on that, was that his mentality going into the game was that he was going to a funeral. that his mindset was, I want to kill the competition. And there was definitely some sour grapes from last year, the way that game unfolded with Brock Purdy getting hurt. And a lot of not just being a Niner fan, and I try not to be a homer, but I think a lot of people understood how different that game could have been, 31-7 final, if the 49ers had either a viable quarterback or Brock Purdy at quarterback all game. And the 49er team believed that, and Trent Williams did not say anything to his teammates. But I saw a video of players rolling into the link, into the visiting locker rooms, wearing their, normal clothes and dressed in black, all black. Was Trent Williams, Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, Fred Warner, Chase Young, among others. That's where the video kind of cut off, but there were others dressed in all black. Trent Williams didn't spread that. I don't know how common that mentality is among athletes about if they want to kill their opponent. The idea is they're going to a funeral, and when you do that, you dress in all black. But even if a memo wasn't sent out, the 49ers had that mentality. And even a player like Chase Young, man, I mean, he came from Washington, so he saw Philly twice a year, an old division rival in the NFC East. He was dialed in. A lot of players were dialed in. You don't win the Super Bowl or you don't win a playoff game in the beginning of December in one game, a road game, even though if it's a rematch game against Philadelphia. But it was a statement game, right? That we're here to play. We know it could have been different last time. It should have been different last time. And it gives San Francisco the confidence that if they are unable to get the number one seed and have the NFC playoffs roll through Santa Clara, that they could go to Philadelphia and win a game. Would they win a game 42-19 again? Probably not. But that's a confidence builder. I think the Eagles maybe, and I don't want to speak for their players, but let's hypothesize here. Was there a bit of maybe overconfidence coming into this game, being 10-1 going into the 49er game, beating the 49ers 31-7 last year to go to the Super Bowl? I think if you're a common sense Eagle player or fan, you understand the impact that Brock Purdy not playing had on that game. And having a 10-1 start while not looking great or dominant, winning games, and good teams are supposed to win close games against Dallas, against the Chiefs, against the Bills, and those are the three most recent games. Of course, they lost at the Jets. Teams are able to stumble, but teams generally, 10 out of 11 games they won. That doesn't happen by accident in the NFL. But I think San Francisco players, can't say much for fans because fans are usually homers anyway, predicting the Niners are going to roll them. I predicted 24-20 Eagles, which was my prediction for the NFC Championship game. My rationale was until the 49ers can win a close game, I'm not going to pick them to win a close game. But guess what, guys? It wasn't close. They won by 23. And I'm a little bit more conservative by nature, but that was a statement when in the fact that they put up 42 points each on the NFC East's best teams, Philly and Dallas, and two of the four best teams in the NFC, along with San Francisco and Detroit, means a lot. That means what they're capable of. Now, do all teams play to their potential every single game? No. Teams have lapses. The opposing team has something to say about, a team, holding a team down offensively or exploiting them defensively. But that was a statement game, and it was nationally televised, so the vast majority of us in the country saw it, and a big piece of that was the defensive game plan by defensive coordinator Steve Wilks. Praised during the first 5 games, under fire during the 3-game losing streak, and now they have a 4-game winning streak, so he's being praised again. However much of that can be attributed to Wilks coming down from the booth, to being on the sideline with his players. He's saying all the right things, that he likes it, that he's enjoying it. He never did it before, other than when he was head coach of the Cardinals and interim head coach of the Panthers, being able to look players in the eye and give feedback on the fly, constructive or praise, happening immediately, not having to pick up the phone and ask to talk to somebody. A bit more personal, right? Helps with growing the relationship during a game time environment when bullets are flying. Had a great game plan, and this is what it was, at least as it pertains to Jalen Hurts, per Nick Bosa. Quote, it was definitely an assignment-focused game. We had to make Jalen focus on the rush more than looking downfield, and we knew that was the key to the game. So our whole mentality was, we're not trying to set the record on sacks. We're trying to close the pocket. We're trying to get his eyes on us. He's trying to get out of the pocket and win that way. So I think we did a really good job of just closing in on him. And that was fantastic to read because in my reaction, podcast on Monday, it did not look like the 49ers were getting home to Jalen Hurts. And the Eagles have one of, if not the best offensive lines in the league. So that's understandable. But this might have been a game, based on what Bosa said, that Steve Wilks was not playing with the all gas, no brakes mentality. It was controlled pass rush, keep Hurts in the pocket, make him beat you with his arm. Let's not give away cheap yards on the ground. And they didn't. Hurts did rush, I think, 7 times for 20 yards. And it was him getting outside. So, out of 72 snaps, are they going to keep Jalen Hurts in the pocket every single play that it's a passing play? Of course not. Edges are going to break contain. They're going to stunt inside, or an offensive lineman may force them inside. But for the vast majority of the game, Jalen Hurts was a non-factor on the ground. And yes, he went out one drive, but let's all remember the drive he was out, the Eagles defense was on the field. And when he came back, I think Marcus Mariota only played for 3 or 4 snaps before Hurts came in again and led them down to a touchdown to make it a 2-score game. But as impressive as the 49ers were against Jalen Hurts, at least against his legs, because Hurts threw for almost 300 yards, and there was a bunch of garbage yards in the fourth quarter, the 46 rushing yards that the 49ers allowed was the Eagles' lowest rushing output in 5 years. Their 2.6 yards per carry and 18 rushing attempts were season lows. And it was still a bit confusing that a team that has such a good O-line, that has such a good running game, and a mobile quarterback, where running is obviously a big part of his game and what the Eagles want to do with the read option. It wasn't there. Philly was up 6-0 in the first, then it became 7-6, 14-6, 21-6. Even at 21-6, though, you don't get away from your identity. That's how games could get away from you. I'm not saying that's why this game got away from the Eagles, but it's not like this game was 24-0 in the first quarter, San Francisco, and forcing Philadelphia to throw more. They proactively made the choice to put the game on Jalen Hurts' arm. And Jalen Hurts is a good enough quarterback, and they've got enough weapons that they could beat a lot of teams in this league. And they beat every team that they played except for the Jets, who have a really good defense and secondary and pass rush. And they turned Hurts over, I think, 2 or 3 times. And the 49ers. And the difference between that Jet game and the 49er game was obviously that Jet game was close at MetLife Stadium. This game was not, and the Niners didn't get any turnovers. This wasn't like Jalen Hurts threw 3 picks. They lost a fumble, and that's why they lost by 23 points. Both teams played a clean game. The Eagles just got their asses kicked. It happens. It happens to good teams. It's happened to the Niners this year. The Bengals put it on them in Santa Clara, 4 or 5 weeks ago. It happens when one team is firing on all cylinders and the other team is struggling a bit. 6 straight touchdowns, 6 straight touchdown drives, scoring drives that the Niners have. That's tough to bounce back from. But one thing that the Niners could still work on, missed tackles. So this game against Philadelphia, they had 12 missed tackles, and that's roughly the same amount that they were averaging during their 3-game losing streak to the Browns, Vikings, and Bengals. And this is a team that's one of the better tackling teams in the league in the past, 3 or 4 years. But it's been a bit of a concern for the second half of the games that they've played this season. Now, let's jump to the offense. And the Eagle game was Brock Purdy's 17th start. If we're not going to count the Dolphins game, we're not going to count playoff games in the NFL. And during that span, he is 14-3, completed 70% of his passes for 4,300 yards, 34 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, a 9.4 yards per pass attempt, which is ridiculously high, and a 116.9 quarterback rating. The rating in yards per attempt would be a high for a quarterback in 49ers history. The 70%, Steve Young beat that in the 94 season, the 4,300 yards. I think Jeff Garcia threw for more. 34 touchdowns, Young threw for more in 1998, and the 8 interceptions, although low, Alex Smith threw for less, and I think it was 2011 or 2012, but he only had 17 touchdowns. Purdy is having an MVP caliber year, and anybody saying about the system and he's a system quarterback and the weapons he had, I'll just briefly recap. Every quarterback is a system quarterback. Every quarterback in the league is playing within an offensive system, and usually the offensive coordinator builds the offense or the system around the strengths of the quarterback. That's why Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson and Jalen Hurts have designed runs and Brock Purdy does not. But that's also why Brock Purdy has shorter to intermediate passes based on timing versus pushing the ball downfield like a Herbert or a Mahomes or Allen, because he doesn't have as big of an arm. And I'm not going to say he processes better or quicker, getting from option 1 to option 2 to option 3 on the field, getting through his reads and his progressions. Shanahan is playing to Purdy's strengths, but I think this is also what Shanahan's offense wants to be. In a perfect world, it will be Purdy's brain, processing power with Josh Allen's arm and Lamar Jackson's legs. But that one person in the NFL does not exist and may never exist, right? Everybody's got to be not as good at something or multiple somethings as they are at other things. But an MVP caliber year, and per Peter King, longtime writer for Sports Illustrated, Brock Purdy right now is the number 1 MVP candidate on his ballot. 5 games to go. A lot can happen. And Peter King, rightfully so, did point to the 3-game losing streak. And his quote was, shouldn't an MVP candidate be able to lift a diminished team? Missing Debo, missing Trent Williams. Things aren't going right in Cleveland. Defense harassing him. And he did get them in field goal range, and Moody just missed the kick against Minnesota, throwing back-to-back interceptions on drives where they could have tied or taken the lead, and Cincinnati was just the better team that day. But there is something to what Peter King, is saying. Do we look at Brock Purdy as a player that elevates the play of people around him? A lot of the greats across sports do that. And I think there's the fundamental or philosophical discussion you can have by saying, well, because he's such a good NFL point guard and he's distributing the ball so well and so on time, does that mean he's making Debo and Ayuk and Kittle and McCaffrey better and others? Yeah, I think it could be looked at that way. But there's also the players with the grit, the fire, the determination, the confidence, some of the moxie, which Purdy does have, that just automatically gets the best out of players. Like you heard, how demanding Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan were during their times playing in the NBA. Certainly not going to put Brock Purdy in that category. But to Peter King's point, I don't know if we've seen him elevate the team and the offense and players when things aren't perfect around him. And those are really 2 games, 3 games if you're going to count Cincinnati, but Cincinnati was just carving up the Niners defense that game. But it's something fair to be said. But I would take right now, you take Jalen Hurts out of the MVP discussion. He got worked by Brock Purdy and the Niners defense, and he did not elevate at all. If you want to talk about an MVP candidate elevating, you still got weapons at receiver, weapons at running back, a good defense, a good offensive line, and on the season, 19 touchdowns and 10 picks. A whole bunch of rushing touchdowns, but again, more than half of them are 1-yard tush pushes. He's out of the conversation. To me, the ones that are in it right now, Tua of the Dolphins, Tyreek Hill, Lamar Jackson, and I would put Purdy and McCaffrey. Now, you could maybe take, unless Tyreek Hill gets to 2,000 yards, and it's a deceiving 2,000 yards because of 17 games. No one did it before in the history of the NFL. Yeah, that's because they were playing 12, 14, 16 games. Now we're up to 17. As long as you stay healthy and it's not anybody, but Tyreek Hill stays healthy, he's got a really good chance of getting 2,000 yards. Still a major accomplishment because that's over, 130 yards a game? 140? But I don't think it's going to be Hill unless he gets 2,000. I don't think it's going to be McCaffrey, even though he's having a great season. The MVP is a quarterback award, which is unfortunate, and they should have maybe a separate most outstanding offensive player award that cannot go to a quarterback. More stats for Purdy against Philadelphia. Against the Blitz, 10 for 10, 213 yards, 3 touchdowns, perfect quarterback rating of 158.3. This is not a surprise. It's a trend. Teams blitz Purdy, he picks it apart. Not usually to 100% completion percentage, but Purdy, and that's just the calm, the being able to process quickly, read who's open, get the ball out, and sometimes the stars align, right? A blitz comes, a screen pass is drawn up. A blitz comes, it's a quick slant or a quick in or a tunnel screen to Debo. Sometimes things align that way to obviously up the completion percentage in yards. But this is not a one-game thing. This is who Brock is. And for those of you out there about the dink and dunk and, well, all he's doing is throwing 5, Debo caught a tunnel screen and went 40-plus yards for a touchdown. He caught a 5-yard in, broke a tackle, went 40-plus yards for the touchdown. Hey, it's football, man. You got to tackle, right? And you got to... Still, he had to make the read, to Debo. The tunnel screen was easy. That was his first read. The into Debo, where Debo shook off a linebacker, was his second read, but he's still getting the ball there on time, and he's making his playmakers make plays. But let me get a drink. Here's an interesting stat for you. 48.6% of Brock Purdy's passing yards this season are yards after the catch. The past 3 MVPs are quarterbacks. 2020, Aaron Rodgers, 52.2% of his yards after the catch. 2021, Rodgers won it again, 52.7% of his yards after the catch. Patrick Mahomes last year, 54.3% of his yards were yards after the catch. I feel like I've exhausted myself across multiple podcasts talking about how Brock Purdy is not a dink and dunk passer, but I've also said and stand by the fact that perception will always overrule reality. But the reality also is any of these quarterbacks that we romanticize and glorify, Tua, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Raheem Mostert, Jeff Wilson, Devin Achane, Cedric Wilson Jr., Clay Chapel, he's got weapons. Burrow had weapons. Allen has weapons. The player that has the least amount of weapons this year is Mahomes. And yes, they're 9-4 and lost at Green Bay last Sunday night. But he's the only one that is elite, that can transcend the players around him and really lift them up. Because I'm not sure what any other quarterback does in Kansas City, even though Andy Reid, great offensive mind, play caller. And listen, they have Pacheco and McKinnon and Kelsey, of course, and Rashee Rice is coming on, Sky Moore. They have players. Outside of Kelsey, no one really scares you in the passing game, but Mahomes scares you. Because if anyone is open, about to be open, or the window's closing, he can do his Mahomes magic and get the ball there. But Purdy is not dink and dunk. And anyone saying, well, he doesn't deserve the MVP because of this, that, or the other thing, he throws 5-yard passes and his team take it to the house. Well, then Rodgers, and Mahomes, based on that yards after catch argument or shitty argument, should not have been MVPs the past 3 years. Lot of NFL to go. 5 games for everybody to separate themselves. But there are worthy candidates in Tua, Tyreek, Jackson, Purdy, and I believe McCaffrey should be considered as well. So now some roster news and notes. The 49ers a few days ago signed safety Logan Ryan and released running back Ty Davis-Price. I think Ty Davis-Price might have been active for 1 or 2 games this year when Eli Mitchell was recovering from however many injuries that he's had. But what if I call Ty Davis-Price? He's a jag. He's just a guy. He was a waste of a 3rd-round draft pick, much like Trey Sermon was the year before him. I'm sure the Niners are going to draft a running back, or maybe it's an undrafted rookie free agent that's coming in. But if you're going to do that, somebody, please, please, please just let Shanahan know, hey, if you're going to draft somebody, find someone who has as many similar qualities as McCaffrey. I know those people are, I'm not saying identical, I'm not saying a clone, although I would be pulling for running back Will Shipley out of Clemson in the second round. Taking a running back in the second might be a little rich, and I don't know if they can get him in the third, but a running back that has a high football IQ, that can run between the tackles, run outside. Shipley is a very good receiver. They don't need these thumpers like a Trey Sermon or a Ty Davis-Price anymore. They are wastes of players in what Shanahan wants to do in this offense, because he just can't rely on McCaffrey too much because of, God forbid, injury, right? And I'm not saying a rookie next year in 2024 would, if McCaffrey misses a couple games, would operate as well as McCaffrey, but at least it's someone with the pedigree of being more of an all-rounded running back than Sermon or Ty Davis-Price. So Price was released. Let's get back to Logan Ryan, 32 years old. He has cornerback and safety experience, played with the Patriots, Titans, Giants. Last year, he was with the Buccaneers and played 9 games in his 10 seasons, 19 interceptions, and 13 sacks. So in addition to Taylor Hawkins on the practice squad at safety, and they had signed another safety last week leading up into the leading up into the Eagle game, they actually bring Logan Ryan onto the 53-man roster. We'll see if he's going to be active or not against the Seahawks. But a veteran, and you could say, well, why didn't they sign him earlier on in the season or in the offseason? Logan Ryan said he makes a lot of sense, as that I think a lot of veterans who are out there as free agents, you're only going to sign for the right opportunity. He's 32 years old, been in the league for 10 years, has made a good amount of money. I think he was working on some entrepreneurial business with his dad. I was like, listen, I'm only going to get off the couch or get off of doing what I'm doing at home with my family for the right opportunity. This is an opportunity to chase another ring, to help a secondary and a defense that hasn't been great with tackling. He can help that when he's in, if they're playing 3 safeties, or if he something happens to Lenore, he has ability playing nickel corner as well. Good, savvy veteran, solid signing at this point in the season when you're going into week 14. No complaints there. And again, Ty Davis-Price, just a guy. In terms of running backs, in case you're wondering, so it's obviously McCaffrey, Eli Mitchell, who is sore. He has a sore knee from the Eagles game in which he was in for 5 plays. Figure that out. And Jordan Mason. On the practice squad is Jeremy McNichols. So if anything's wrong with Mitchell for the Seattle game, they could always elevate Jeremy McNichols, and they could bring in, another running back to have 2 running backs on the practice squad if they need to, or if they deem that they need to in the coming weeks. Another potential roster note. So San Francisco is one of 4 teams, along with the Eagles, Chiefs, and Ravens, interested in tight end Zach Ertz, who was most recently with the Cardinals, asked for his release and was granted it. Nobody picked him up due to his salary. So now, when he was on waivers, teams are bidding for his services. The Eagles, because Dallas Goedert is coming off of a fractured arm, he may play this Sunday night against Dallas. The Chiefs, again, it's Kelsey and really nobody else. And the Ravens lost Mark Andrews. So Zach Ertz would make sense there. And as another weapon in San Francisco behind Kittle, especially because Ross Dwelley injured his ankle and he's going to be out for multiple weeks. Ross Dwelley is no great shakes. It's not like, we need to replace the production of Ross Dwelley, who has 1 or 2 receptions on the year. Ertz would be a huge upgrade. We'll see where he decides to sign. This would be a coup for San Francisco if they could get another receiving option at tight end. In terms of injuries, I'm recording this on a Thursday. 5 players did not practice Wednesday. Eric Armstead, battling an ankle and knee injury. He's going to be out a week or 2. Spencer Burford, offensive lineman, guard, knee. Dwelley, ankle, going to be out for a couple weeks. May go on short-term IR. Darrell Luter, hamstring, cornerback. And Eli Mitchell, I mentioned, a sore knee. Let's quickly talk about Pro Bowl leaders. And this is voting by fans. So the Niners have leaders at 7 positions. Running back, Christian McCaffrey. Fullback, Kyle Juszczyk. Tight end, George Kittle. Tackle, Trent Williams. Defensive end, Nick Bosa. Defensive tackle, Javon Hargrave. And inside linebacker, Fred Warner. Those are NFC leaders because they broke it out between the two conferences, and that feels about right. And Purdy obviously not being there, I'm okay with. I'm not one of those, he's having such a great year, MVP candidate. He should be. I think it's Dak. I think Dak got the NFC nod, and deservedly so right now. But 7 Pro Bowl or All-Pro caliber players, leading vote getters per fans in the NFC. And before we get into the Seattle preview, the 49ers can clinch a playoff spot. They cannot clinch the NFC West this week. If they beat Seattle and if the Rams lose, the 49ers would then just need one more win to clinch the West, but they can get into the playoffs if they beat Seattle and either the Giants beat the Packers or the Vikings lose to the Raiders. Feels like a foregone conclusion at this point that the Niners will be in the playoffs. Hopefully they will win the West. Hopefully they can get the number 1 seed. It's just a matter of when that stuff will get wrapped up. But it starts on Sunday in a rematch against the Seattle Seahawks, 4:05 Eastern on Fox. The number 1 crew that you heard against Philadelphia, Kevin Burkhardt, Greg Olsen, and others will be on the call. The Niners are a 10.5-point favorite against Seattle. This is a Seattle team that was 6-3 or 6-4, lost their last 2 to San Francisco and Seattle and Dallas. They were at Dallas in control of that game early in the fourth quarter, up 35-27, wind up losing 41-35. They're 6-6, tied with the Rams for second in the NFC West. Seattle put it on Dallas, and Dallas is a top 5 defense across the board. 406 yards of total offense. Geno Smith, a week healthier from that elbow ligament strain, 334 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception, was not sacked at all. So kudos to the Seahawks line, to the game plan, and to Geno. But running the ball, again, struggling against Dallas, 22 rushes for 72 yards, although they did score 2 touchdowns. Conversely, Dallas, very explosive offense. They had their way with Seattle and also went over 400 total yards. But on the ground, Dallas ran 34 times for 136 yards and 1 touchdown. The Seahawks' 3-headed receiving monster of Metcalf, Smith and Jigba, and Lockett. We'll start with Metcalf, 6 for 134 and 3 touchdowns. Jackson Smith and Jigba, 7 for 62. Tyler Lockett, 5 for 47. And the Seahawks defense got to Dak 4 times. And Seattle now is coming off of extra days rest. So they had the Thanksgiving night game at home against the Niners, played the next Thursday at Dallas, and are getting a couple extra days rest, but traveling to Santa Clara this Sunday to play the 49ers. I mentioned the first time that they played, Seattle is a middling team. Offensively, they're ranked 19th. Passing the ball, 14th, averaging 231 yards a game. Running, they are 27th, only 94 yards a game. In points, ranked 14th, averaging 22 points scored per game. On defense, they are 23rd overall, 23rd against the pass, 234 yards per game allowed, 21st against the rush, 119 yards, and 25th in points allowed, allowing 24 points a game. Seattle is banged up. They have a lot of players that are questionable going into this game, and questionable is a 50-50 proposition, and I would probably say 3/4 of the players I'm going to list are probably going to play. Running backs Ken Walker and Zach Charbonnet are questionable. Center Evan Brown. Guard Anthony Bradford. Right tackle Abraham Lucas. On defense, linebacker Jordan Brooks. Defensive end Leonard Williams. Cornerback Trey Brown. And safety Jamal Adams. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 players. I think either 5 or 6 of them are going to play at least. Seattle's playing for their playoff lives here. They have San Francisco this week. They are at home for Philadelphia next week. And they have a glut of teams that are tied, that are 6-6. The Falcons that are leading the South, the Rams, the Seahawks, the Packers, the Vikings. Then you have teams like the Buccaneers and the Saints, who are only a game back at 5-7. So there's going to be some, we'll just call it very average teams that are going to be left out of the NFC playoff picture, not being able to get that 6th or 7th wildcard spot. But a lot of teams, 6 and 6 or 5-7, that are jockeying for position. Seattle, disheartening that they lost at Dallas. That would have been a huge win for the Seahawks, but played well, as inept as they looked against San Francisco. And it wasn't actually all that bad. Yes, San Francisco got up big. Seattle, remember, after a good punt return, got down. It was 24-10. Down inside the red zone. Niners came up big with a sack to hold them to a field goal, make it 24-13. And then the 49ers with a late touchdown to make it a 31-13 victory. The Seahawks did not score an offensive touchdown. Remember, it was Brock Purdy throwing out of his own end zone. Ball went off Christian McCaffrey's hands into Jordan Brooks' arms. Pick 6 returned to get Seattle on the board. I think this is a game where San Francisco can't start slow and you can't have a letdown. This isn't a look-ahead game because they're playing Arizona next. This is a division rival that Shanahan and the 49ers, with Geno Smith at quarterback, have played really, really well. Charvarius Ward has played really well on DK Metcalf. We'll see if he continues to shadow him. Let's see how Ambry Thomas does against Tyler Lockett. And it's going to be Diamador Lenore against Njigba Smith in the slot. And we'll see what the running backs between Walker and Charbonnet, who's going to be active. Not having Kenneth Walker changes so much for that Seattle offense. They have they're banged up, but they have a pretty good offensive line. Kenneth Walker is an explosive and powerful runner that can keep Seattle ahead of the chains. Geno Smith playing quarterback at 2nd and 7 or 3rd and 4 is a lot better than 2nd and 10 or 3rd and 8, right? And Geno is now 2 weeks removed from that elbow injury. But this is a game where the Niners, there's no reason to be looking ahead. There's no reason to be reading your own press clippings. There's no reason to be pounding your chest or believing you're better than you are coming off of that Eagles game. That was an N-of-1 game in Philadelphia. This is a new N-of-1 game against Seattle. And you can really bury the Seahawks, any chance of them winning the division, sweeping the yearly series against them, and really have them scramble with all the other teams for a wild card spot. So this would go a long way towards clinching the West. And of course, as I mentioned last podcast, the only way the Niners have a shot at the number 1 seed, they have to win out. They need to win all of their next 5 games and hope Philadelphia drops one along the way. And the Eagles are at Dallas this Sunday night. Now, last matchup, the Niners defense, again, did not let up a touchdown, held Seattle out of the end zone on drives where Seattle looked like they were going to be marching in. Purdy didn't have a huge game. He only had about 180 yards until the last throw of the game got him to 209, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. McCaffrey did run it for 114 yards and a touchdown, and as a team, they ran the ball 169 yards for 3 touchdowns. Geno Smith, only 180 yards, no touchdowns, and interception. And as a team, again, without Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet leading the rushing attack of 21 rushes for 88 yards. The Niners did get to Geno 6 times. I think the fans better be into it, right? It's a home game in Santa Clara. The Niners have had Seattle's number. This game, needed for home field, goes a long way to clinching the NFC West. I think everybody is going to be pumped for it. Can't start slow, but should they start slow like they did against Philadelphia in the first quarter where it looked terrible, no points, only down 6-0, -6 yards total, you saw how Shanahan and the offense and everybody bounced back there. So I wouldn't worry too much if this game starts like the Eagles game, as long as they can continue to keep Seattle out of the end zone. This is just a really good matchup for the Niners and a bad matchup for the Seahawks. But if they get the Seahawks offense playing like they played against Dallas, this could be a longer day than the 49ers and many of us fans are anticipating. All that being said, I think the point spread of 10.5, although it seems high, maybe feels about right. I'm going to take San Francisco 27-17 over Seattle to get to their 10th win of the season. So that concludes the 49ers section of the podcast. Please stick around. Coming up, we're going to be talking the New York Jets and everyone's favorite quarterback, Zach Wilson. We're going to be talking how Disney has lost more than $1.3 billion on its movies in theaters this year. And we will conclude by making Week 4 NFL picks. Stick around.
It's plus time.
So the New York Jets are back to Zach Wilson after falling to the Falcons and not producing a touchdown yet again. And that was with Tim Boyle at quarterback. Trevor Siemian came in. Boyle got benched. Siemian wound up having 3 fumbles, I believe, and throwing an interception. Here's what happened, and I'm sure those of you that live in the Northeast know this already. It was rumored that head coach Robert Saleh wanted Zach Wilson to come back and be the starting quarterback. Remember, Zach Wilson has been the third string emergency inactive quarterback that can only play if Boyle and Siemian got hurt. And there was a rumor that Zach Wilson declined, that he did not want to play this game and possibly for the remainder of the season as well. Head coach Robert Saleh has come out and softly refuted that. Quarterback Aaron Rodgers went on the Pat McAfee show on ESPN and said that, if that was a leak, a locker room leak, that's totally unacceptable. And he's happy that he's going to be back in the building more soon to take the reins and just to clean up some of this childish nonsense. And what's interesting about this, first let's actually get into the whole Zach Wilson snare. And his situation. And I've heard him get blasted on TV and radio for you're not being a team guy, you're being a me guy, not a we guy. You get that opportunity to start again. You should be so happy and put good stuff on film, et cetera, et cetera. And I agree with all that. Zach Wilson's tenure in New York has been a failure. It's been a wild disappointment for someone who was drafted number 2. They're holding on to him to try to justify the number 2 pick. The Niners didn't need Trey Lance anymore, who was the number 3 pick, traded him in the offseason. Only got a 4th-round pick back from the Cowboys, but there is something to be said for cutting your losses and not throwing good money after bad if you know that player is, in Lance's case, just not the right fit right now and was obviously leapfrogged by Purdy and Sam Darnold in the offseason. In the Jets' case, they brought Aaron Rodgers in and thought, Zach could be the backup. Zach Wilson never should have been the backup. They did not want Zach Wilson to play. That is why they brought Aaron Rodgers in. Zach Wilson should have been the 3rd quarterback. They should have brought a Jacoby Brissett, a Teddy Bridgewater, say it again, Josh Dobbs, Taylor Heineke, whoever in, that if worst case scenario happens, and it did, 4 plays into the season, Aaron Rodgers ruptures his Achilles, that you have someone that can play functional offense, because it's not Zach Wilson. From Zach's point of view, so I understand everything about he should want to play, prove his worth, stick it to the coaches. You were wrong about benching me. Zach Wilson's just not good enough, guys. He's not an NFL starting quarterback. He's barely an NFL backup quarterback. Maybe he's in the wrong situation. Maybe Nathaniel Hackett's offense is absolute ass, and the only reason it looks good is because you have a top 10 quarterback of all time running it. But I'm sure Aaron Rodgers could run I'm sure I could draw plays for Aaron Rodgers and it'll make me look good. So the jury's out on Nathaniel Hackett, much like it was out on Adam Gase and other coordinators who have had star quarterbacks make them look better than they actually are. That's the big joke. Oh, Nathaniel Hackett's offense only needs a top 10 quarterback all time to run well, because anybody else, it looks like shit. And I know the Jets have had injuries on the O-line and all that crap. But I also understand Zach Wilson's point in this. You guys benched me multiple times last year. You benched me this year. You didn't even bench me. You made me the 3rd string quarterback. Fuck you. I'm just going to sit. There's no way Zach Wilson's going to improve his trade value by playing because he's going to look like crap. In comparison to Tim Boyle and Trevor Siemian, he may look passable, but he's going to take a beating. They're going to keep losing. He's going to look like shit. So I can understand his perspective of why bother. As a competitor getting paid millions of dollars, you would think you'd want to play. You know, if Zach Wilson doesn't play this week, and he has been announced the starter, he is going to start. But let's say he didn't play this week and something happened, he may never start a game again in the NFL. So even with the deck stacked against you and the odds looking really bad that you're going to look even average, go out there. Because the other thing that he should remember is another coach isn't going to want to take you on if you're going to wilt from the moment, if you're going to give up on your team, if you're going to only think about yourself, especially as a quarterback. So I understand the mentality. He's taking a beating. The team doesn't want him. He's not going to be there next year. And if he is, everybody should get fired. Everybody, even the janitors, secretaries on down, parking attendants should get fired from the Jets if Zach Wilson's on the team. He knows he's not going to be there, but if he wants another opportunity in the NFL, it behooves him to play, then not, because I think savvy offensive coordinators, good GMs can look at the Jets and say, that's a dumpster fire. Nobody would succeed with that team the way they're just so banged up, and Nathaniel Hackett may not be a good OC, et cetera, et cetera. Looks like Sean Payton was right. Right, guys? Look at the Broncos. Look at the Jets. But again, still organizational malpractice. Look at what's happening in the NFL this year, and maybe it's an anomaly, but I'm curious to see how in the offseason teams approach the backup quarterback situation. You have the Browns who lose to Deshaun Watson a couple times. It's PJ Walker and Darius Thompson-Robinson, and Joe Flacco steps in, gets signed 2 weeks ago, steps in and looks relatively functional against the Rams. Jets could have had him. Josh Dobbs was traded twice, could have had him. Carson Wentz to the Rams, could have had him. But the league-wide issues with quarterback injuries are sinking some teams, like the Jets, because the Jets are just an average quarterback away from being a wild card team. That's all they are. They don't have that. They have a quarterback that might not be able to start on my kid's flag football team. But you have the Browns with quarterback issues, the Colts with Gardner Minshew, keeping them afloat. What are they, 7-5? Mitchell Trubisky is now the quarterback for the Steelers. Kenny Pickett had ankle surgery. They haven't ruled him out yet for tonight's game. Are you serious, Mike Tomlin? Who are you fooling? Trubisky's going to be quarterback for the next couple weeks. Luckily, they have New England this week. That should be a win, although what a disgusting game. Trevor Lawrence, high ankle sprain, hasn't been ruled out for Sunday, but he is going to be out. It's going to be C.J. Beathard. The Bengals with Joe Burrow. Jake Browning had a game for the ages, beating the Jaguars. Jets haven't, I don't think there's any, you couldn't add 3 games of quarterback passing to equal what Jake Browning did against the Jaguars this past Monday night. Jimmy G gets benched in Las Vegas. Aiden O'Connell's the quarterback. Giants, Daniel Jones hurt, so it's Tyrod Taylor, Tommy DeVito. And Atlanta's been bouncing back and forth between Desmond Ridder and Taylor Heineke. Starting quarterbacks or quarterback issues and carousels are a big problem in the NFL. So to see what teams are going to do next year, are you going to sign, if you're the Jets and you're giving Rodgers, I don't even know what it is, 35, 40, 45 million. I know he reworked his contract. But would you give a Gardner Minshew, Jacoby Brissett, Taylor Heineke, $7 to $10 million as your just in case? You should. And the old thinking was, well, once you lose your starting quarterback for, 3, 4, for the whole season, your season is gone. True, but we've seen the Niners bounce back last year and do that. We're seeing the Colts, not a great team overall. And you could even say Gardner, that's probably a bad example because Gardner Minshew is a better quarterback right now than Anthony Richardson. But if Jake Browning of the Bengals can keep the Bengals in the playoff hunt until the last week or two of the season, it's fantastic. If Flacco can navigate this Browns team, get a win this week against the Jaguars, who are going to be playing their backup quarterback, that'll be great. Because you can see when you go cheap, PJ Walker, Dorian Thompson-Robinson is a rookie, or you go rookie, it's not going to work. You spend the $6.5 million on Sam Darnold. I'm not saying he's any great shakes or the best backup in the league, but you hope you never have to use him. It's the ultimate in insurance, right? I think teams need to navigate their salary cap a little bit more to push off the inevitable nosedive if you lose your starter for the season. But then if it's a 2, 3, 4 game thing, you're able to stay afloat. Maybe win 2 of 2 games, or maybe sneak 3 and go 3-1. Just didn't want to do that. But I just still don't foresee Joe Douglas or Robert Saleh going anywhere, because this team is not as bad if Aaron Rodgers doesn't get hurt. In a weird way, I wonder if Tim Boyle was the one that leaked that Zach Wilson did not want to play, because Tim Boyle got cut on, I think, Tuesday. And they wound up signing Brett Rippon off of the Seattle Seahawks practice squad to be the number 3 emergency quarterback. We all knew Tim Boyle was shit. Tim Boyle was only on the team because he's familiar with Zach, the offensive system, and he played with Aaron Rodgers before. But he's trash. The fact that they had to see him play twice before they cut him is ridiculous. I honestly think Tim Boyle was the leak, because I think Tim Boyle is probably more functional than Brett Rippon. Who the hell's Brett Rippon? I think he started, was it 1 game this year or last year for somebody, but you're going to bring him in cold. He's going to have no idea what's going on for probably the first month, and the season's over. To me, Tim Boyle leaked it, for whatever that's worth. But he was bad enough that he never should have been on this team to begin with. Yeah, your 3rd string quarterback is a marginal, quarterback at best anyway, but still. We all knew it, Jets. I just don't. Guys are slow. Guys are just slow on the uptake. So let's transition from football to Disney before we get into Week 14 NFL picks. As I tease at the open and at the break, Disney has lost more than $1.3 billion, $1.37 billion to be exact, theatrically this year. What does that mean? It means movies that they produced to be in theaters during their theatrical run lost money when you compare what the ticket sales were versus how much it cost to make the movie and advertise the movie. The only Disney movie to turn a profit this year was Guardians of the Galaxy 3, turned a profit of $28 million. Otherwise, and we're going to go from, and these are big numbers, but small big numbers to big numbers, and they are all negative. Here are your other Disney releases this year. The Boogeyman, negative $30 million. A Haunting in Venice lost $38 million. Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania lost $80 million. Elemental, animated Pixar, lost $90 million. The Creator lost $92 million. The Little Mermaid live action lost $115 million. Haunted Mansion lost $192 million. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny lost $214 million. Animated movie Wish lost $235, and The Marvels lost $259 million. Now so again, this is just how much it lost when you compare what it cost to make and promote the movie versus solely ticket sales. Not once this went video on demand, if anybody purchased it on an Amazon Prime or Vudu or something like that. It's not accounting any merchandising from these movies, anything like that. Just ticket sales versus cost of production and advertising. That's terrible. Now, however much that Disney can write off this $1.37 billion, they'll do their creative Hollywood accounting, and they'll even say that Guardians of the Galaxy lost money, just to maybe not keep them so deep in the red. But a couple things going on here. One, they have to rethink the types of movies they're going to release and how much they're spending on them. I didn't think Elemental would bomb as much as it did, and that movie actually had legs. They were lucky it only lost $90 million. Movie like Quantumania or The Little Mermaid. Quantumania, if there is that Marvel fatigue, I don't know. I still haven't seen it. It's on Disney Plus. I do want to watch it. Little Mermaid, changing the nationality of the main character. Did it have was it a factor? I don't know. But live action Lion King made a whole lot of money. And music and movies generally are run by teenage girls or younger. And this is a movie that was packaged up for them on a silver platter to love and watch multiple times, but it loses over $100 million. Haunted Mansion, 1, it didn't come out near Halloween. It came out like a month early. And 2, it just looked like a bad friggin' idea. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, I think at some point we don't want to see our childhood heroes as geriatric slobs. And knowing that Harrison Ford's not really doing the stunts, and knowing that, oh my God, what is he, like 72, 75, is still being an adventure. Nostalgia only goes so far. They should have learned from the 4th movie with the aliens, the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and never released this. It's on Disney Plus. I want to watch it. I'll get around to it at some point, but lost over $200 million. I was most surprised by this versus any of the movies because of the Indiana Jones brand, because of how long it's been around. You're talking, 40 years? You're talking parents who saw these movies as kids, parents who want to share these movies with kids. The fact that outside of Pixar movies, there aren't really movies like an Indiana Jones, an action-oriented movie that's not R-rated. You don't have to worry about over-the-top violence. You don't have to worry about cursing or swearing. A movie like The Goonies, right? I mean, granted, that was kid-centric, but where are those movies now, live action movies for kids that are not animated? They really don't exist. And I thought all of those things together would have maybe not spelled a hit for Indiana Jones, but not such a financial albatross. Wish I really had no opinion on. And the Marvels, again, I am not sexist. I am not a misogynist, but the whole go woke, go broke thing, it's a real thing. You can't have a movie that has 3 female leads carry the movie to financial success. That's just the society we live in. That's just moviegoers' preferences. When you want to watch a superhero movie, usually the heroes are male. Then again, you have something like Ant-Man and the Wasp, so that was a 50-50 proposition, and that still lost a ton of money. Captain Marvel made a lot of money. It was a good, fun movie. She was introduced in between Infinity War and Endgame. She had a purpose and a role there. The Ms. Marvel show on Disney Plus, I watched it. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it for what it was, and I understood who the demographic was. But that's not a demographic, teen girls or younger, that are going to go to see a superhero movie in droves. It's still that, 15 to 29-ish year old male demographic that's going to bring maybe their younger sister, their girlfriend. And of course, parents are going to see it. Of course, a wide range of people are going to see it, but from a demographic standpoint, the Marvels did not play to who they thought they would, which is why when Madame Web comes out, which is female Spider-Man characters, it is going to bomb mercilessly. And if you're going to make a movie like The Marvels, Madame Web, Indiana Jones to a certain extent, even though I know Harrison Ford's paycheck was probably 20, 25, 30 plus $million, you got to make this as cheap as possible. You have to take a page from, and I might see this in the coming weeks, unless it's going to be on demand relatively soon. If you guys haven't heard of this, a new Godzilla movie came out. It's called Godzilla -1. I have no idea what the title means. Haven't seen it. Japanese flick, so subtitles. And I know that's going to drive a lot of people away, American audience people away. And maybe there's going to be a dubbed version at some point. I'm not sure, but it's probably not the version that's in theaters now. Was made for $15 million. From what I've heard, the special effects look ridiculously phenomenal for $15 million. The director of the movie was in visual effects. So far worldwide, and it's only released in the US for 1 week, it has made $41 million. So it's already profitable or on its way to being profitable. Do you think any blockbuster movie with blockbuster effects will ever be made for $15 million in this country? No. And the key phrase is in this country, because a lot of the reading that I've done is when you are farming out visual effects to Japan and specifically Japan because that's where this movie was made and where it takes place, it's akin to slave labor. People are not getting paid anything. What I have heard is that it's a wonderful work environment. The Japanese culture is one of utmost respect, pleasant, but nobody gets paid. So that $15 million can get stretched super far when your visual effects are not happening at Industrial Light and Magic or whatever Peter Jackson's company's names is. But it can be done. You can make a blockbuster movie for cheap. Look at Blair Witch Project. We're going back now, 25 years? And granted, that didn't have any effects, but you can make good, profitable movies and not be so beholden to having it being an FX extravaganza. Marvel movies, I guess, need it. Pixar movies are animated fully, so you can't get around it. The Little Mermaid live action, you can't really get around. Haunted Mansion. But maybe you just think, maybe we don't need to make this movie at all. If we're just going to lose money, why bother making a movie like this at all? In this Godzilla -1 movie, in case you're wondering, out of a 10, it's gotten an 8.5 on Internet Movie Database. And on Rotten Tomatoes, a 97% critic score and a 98% audience score. And this movie is going back to Godzilla's roots or origin. So it's taking place in Japan right after World War II, where obviously Japan has just gone through the war and some of its big cities have been decimated. Godzilla attacks. And it's a 2-hour movie, and it feels like it's a little bit more of a personal movie, character-driven, but that Godzilla and the destruction of buildings, everything looks top-notch. If I can find a couple hours in the next week or so, if it's still maybe in theaters during Christmas break, I'll go check it out. But when it gets on to a Netflix or Prime, I will definitely see it. But for any Godzilla fans out there, and you're going to see it's overshadowing Godzilla vs. Kong Part 2, which the trailer was released last week. And that looks really cool. That looks fine. But we'll see how much that's going to gross when everything's taken into account. Production costs, advertising, director, actors' fees versus ticket sales. That's another movie that may not turn a profit. But good on the production team for Godzilla -1. If nothing else, right? If nothing else, they put out a highly acclaimed movie, one that I'm interested in seeing for the reasons that I mentioned. And I'm not a Godzilla fan at all, but a lot of ways I'm a fan of the underdog. I want to see how far $15 million takes you. And by all accounts, the story is very good as well. So let's conclude making Week 14 NFL picks. The Cardinals and the Commanders are on a bye tonight. The Amazon Prime game, another opportunity for Al Michaels to tie a noose around his neck and jump. The Patriots will be at the Steelers. I don't think the Patriots have a starting quarterback, whether it's Mac Jones or Bailey Zappi, or I think Mac Jones has been benched, whatever, but it is going to be Mitchell Trubisky for the Steelers. I'm hoping Najee Harris on my fantasy team has a good game. Give me the Steelers. Not sure I'm going to watch. Starting off the 1 o'clock games on Sunday, Tampa Bay at Atlanta. Both teams need this. Tampa's 5-7, Atlanta's 6-6. Atlanta coming off of, we'll call it a big win at the Jets, but anybody beating the Jets, it's not really a big win. But the Jets do have a very good defense. Atlanta was able to move the ball, and I think they will do the same against the Buccaneers. Atlanta in a close one. Detroit, Chicago, I went back and forth with this. Chicago looking a bit better. Detroit not looking fantastic the past 3 weeks, but I think they will do enough. Cold weather outside against the Bears. Will not be shocked if the Bears win that game. Indianapolis against Cincinnati. I'm a believer in Jake Browning at least for 1 week. And again, Colts 7-5, Bengals 6-6. This is an elimination game, at least for the Bengals. And if this is a win that the Bengals can get and draw even with the Colts at 6-6, they will have the head-to-head tiebreaker as it stands for wild card positioning. I'll take Cincinnati. Jacksonville at Cleveland. If CJ Beathard's going to start, the Jaguars have no chance. I will take Joe Flacco, the Browns, and that defense to sack Beathard at least 5 times. Panthers at the Saints. Not really much you can say about the Panthers except they're going to have the top draft pick, except they're not because it's going to go to the Bears. So this is a lost season. Saints 5-7, still in contention in the NFC South. And for a wild card, I will take New Orleans. Houston at the Jets. Zach Wilson, Trevor Siemian, Brett Rippon. It does not matter. I think the Houston Texans are a better, more balanced team, and CJ Stroud's Offensive Rookie of the Year campaign continues. They'll get the win. The Rams at the Ravens. Rams 6-6, feisty, fun team. Got a good victory last week against the Browns at home, but I think they will fall at Baltimore. Minnesota and Las Vegas feels like a coin flip game. Not sure who's starting, if it's Jaron Reed or former 49er quarterback Nick Mullins for the Vikings. But given that quarterback uncertainty and whoever's going to be quarterbacking hasn't played much, and I don't know if they're going to go back to Josh Dobbs. I just haven't followed up on Minnesota Vikings news recently. I will take Aiden O'Connell and the Raiders. I took the Niners over the Seahawks. Buffalo at Kansas City, always a sexy game, less sexy than it has been in previous years. Buffalo, I believe, at 6-6 as well, needs this. The Chiefs are going to win the West, but they will also beat the Bills this week. Denver at the Chargers. Denver had its, 5 or 6 game win streak snapped last week at Houston. Chargers at home, not really a threat to make a wild card this year, just counting down the days until head coach Brandon Staley gets fired, but they will beat the Broncos. Philadelphia at Dallas. It will make my stomach sick for 3 hours. I'll be popping Pepsids probably quarterly to root for the Dallas Cowboys, which I will be solely for playoff position for the 49ers. But I think the Cowboys do beat the Eagles on Sunday Night Football. And again, the morons who programmed 2 Monday Night Football games are back, and you got 2 stinkers. One game's going to be on ABC, one game's going to be on ESPN. I don't know which is on which because I don't care that much. But the Tennessee Titans are going to go into Miami and get absolutely slaughtered, take the Dolphins there, and the Packers will be at the Giants taking on Tommy Cutlets DeVito. I think the Packers, Jordan Love, and the team looking good. There's the possibility a 6-6 Packers team could end up 11-6 to end the season. They could run the table. They're going to beat the Giants on Monday night. Both games are at around, I think, 8:15. Again, ABC, ESPN, for those of you that have absolutely nothing better to do. And that concludes the podcast for today and this week. Like always, I want to thank you for listening, for taking time out of your busy schedules to make us part of your listening routine. I always appreciate that. NBA in-season tournament, the Lakers and the Pacers make it to the semifinals. I think next week the tournament concludes with the semifinals and final in Las Vegas. Hockey, college basketball, Army-Navy this week, final college football game before we get into bowl season, which is going to kick off, I don't know if it's next week or the week after. And then a full slate of games on Sunday and 2 on Monday because of capitalism. And with that, I just want to say again, thank you for listening. Until we speak again, everyone stay happy, healthy, and safe. Talk soon. Take care.